All right, guys, I'm going to go rapid fire on this one, so stay with me. I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm just going to tell you what you absolutely have to know for the midterm. So stay with me. Pause it if you need to. Whatever you got to do. So let's go. Number 33, what were the most significant accomplishments of George Washington's presidency? Number 1, he put down the Whiskey Rebellion. Number 2, he avoided getting involved with European countries in what we call entangling alliances. Number 3, he established the precedent of stepping down after 2 terms. Before George Washington, or even really before FDR in the Great Depression, there was no actual constitutional limit on how many times someone could be the president. The precedent of only serving 2 terms or 8 years was established by George Washington because he stepped down after his second term. He didn't have to, but he chose to. Number 34, the Whiskey Rebellion was one of Washington's accomplishments. And this is similar to Shays' Rebellion, that a group of farmers rise up and rebel against the government. But the difference here is in this one, under the new U.S. Constitution, the federal government is much stronger. And with the Whiskey Rebellion, Washington is able to prove once and for all the supremacy of the federal government and proves that the federal government can enforce laws within a state because he uses 12,000 troops to crush this small rebellion of farmers who were rebelling over a tax on whiskey. Number 35 and 36. Let's look at the chart here between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. The Federalists were founded and really led by Alexander Hamilton. The Democratic Republicans were led by Thomas Jefferson. The Federalists were mainly supported by the rich New England businessmen, while the Democratic Republicans were mainly supported by poor farmers in the South. The platform or beliefs of the Federalists, the main beliefs of the Federalists, were that they supported a closer relationship with Great Britain, they supported the Bank of the United States, and they supported higher tariffs. That was good for the U.S. economy. They also had a very loose interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. The platform or beliefs of the Democratic Republicans was a closer relationship with France, no Bank of the United States, lower tariffs, because that hurt the South, and they had a very strict interpretation of the Constitution. Number 37, the Northwest Ordinance was a law that was passed to help govern some of the land in the northwest parts of the United States, which was like back then was like Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, that territory. That was won from the British during the American Revolution. So they have all this new land, so they got to figure out a way for those territories to become states. So the Northwest Ordinance kind of lays out the process for all those territories in that part of the country to become states when the time comes. It also said that those territories would be divided up into little plots of land, which would be sold, and some of the money that was used or that was earned by selling that land could be used for public schools. And it also said that slavery would not be allowed in those Northwest territories. Number 30, I guess back to number 37, this demonstrated the power of the federal government because it shows that the federal government, again, is the one establishing the rules, not the state. Shows the power of the federal government. Number 38, it was very difficult for the United States to remain neutral during the French and British conflicts during the 1790s because while they tried to stay neutral, when they were trading on the open seas, the British Navy would stop American ships, board American ships, and then kidnap, or what they call impress, American sailors and force them to serve in the British military, in the British Navy. Because the Americans still sounded very British. It was hard to kind of prove that you weren't a British sailor who had deserted from his ship. So when Americans find out about this at home, they get very upset and put pressure on the government to declare war on the British. But the French are also doing the impressment as well. So all of this is going to lead, this conflict is going to lead to the War of 1812, number 39, which was fought between Great Britain and the United States. The main reasons for war, like we said, number 1 would be impressment of sailors. The United States wanted freedom of the seas. Number 2, the United States wanted more land. They wanted to expand, mainly into Canada, because it was right above them, to the north. And the third reason was that Britain was supporting some Indian attacks against white settlements in North America. So the U.S. goes to war against Britain. The significance of the War of 1812 is that, number 1, it was a stalemate. No side really won, but no side really lost either. So the United States can at least say in 2 wars of Britain, they never actually lost the war. The Federalist Party is also going to disappear after the War of 1812 because at the very end of the war, a group of Federalists get together and meet, and they start talking about this idea of secession. They meet in Hartford, Connecticut, so they call this the Hartford Convention, and they start talking about this idea that if they don't get what they want from the U.S. government, they might just secede and start their own country. Well, this is going to make them look like traitors, and now no one wants to be part of the Federalist Party because no one wants to be called a traitor. So their party is basically just going to die. The U.S. also becomes more industrialized during the war because they have to rely on their own industry because they can't trade with Britain. They have to manufacture their own goods, so they start building more factories. The United States also becomes more isolationist. They do not want to be involved in any more world conflicts for a while after the War of 1812. They had enough conflict with Britain and other countries. And because of that, it's going to decrease tensions between the United States and Great Britain. Number 40, national infrastructure is all the physical buildings, roads, bridges, canals the government builds and pays for. Two major examples of national infrastructure would be the Erie Canal that connected the western farmers to the Atlantic Ocean so they could trade their goods, and also the National Road, which made it easier to transport and trade goods. Number 41, manifest destiny is the belief, this very almost kind of like religious in a way, but it's a belief that God had decreed that it was the destiny of the United States to extend all the way to the Pacific Ocean, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and take all that land. Number 42, the cotton gin was an invention that really dramatically increased the number of slaves in the United States. The cotton gin separates seeds from cotton, which makes it much more profitable to produce cotton, makes it easier to make money off of producing cotton. So now, with cotton more profitable, Southerners are going to need more slaves to work in their cotton fields. Number 43, some major reform movements of the 1790s and 1860s. You have education, which is led by Horace Mann, the idea of universal mandated education. The temperance movement is trying to ban alcohol. Prison reforms, led by Dorothy Dix, kind of separating the mentally ill from actual criminals. And the suffrage movement, led by Susan B. Anthony, for trying to get women the right to vote. Speaking of women getting the right to vote, number 44, the Seneca Falls Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848. Where a group of women get together to talk about how to get more rights for women, specifically the right to vote. Nationalism is the devotion to one's country, where you are just really strongly devoted to your country and very proud to be from whatever country you're from. You and proud to be a part of the people that you share a common ethnicity, culture, and language with. Number 46, Andrew Jackson becomes the 7th president of the United States in 1828, and So we begin a period called Jacksonian democracy. And when we say that, quote-unquote, Jacksonian democracy, we're talking about the expansion of democracy to more people under Andrew Jackson, where Andrew Jackson kind of expands this idea of democracy to the common man. And a big part of this was the removal of the property qualifications to vote. Before Andrew Jackson was president, you had to be white, you had to be a man, and you had to own property to be able to vote. Well, right before he becomes president in the election of 1828, they remove, in most states, the property qualification to vote. You still have to be white, you still have to be a guy to vote, but you don't have to own property. So this means now not just rich people, but also poor white men can vote, which expands democracy. Number 47, Andrew Jackson was also responsible for signing the Indian Removal Act, which removed the Indians from the east to the west out to Oklahoma. The Trail of Tears was the forced removal of Native Americans, specifically the Cherokee Indians, from the southeastern United States out to Oklahoma. Number 48, the Mexican-American War was won by the United States. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was the treaty that ended the war, and this treaty, what it said was that, number one, the Rio Grande would be the Texas border. It basically gave more land to Texas, and it said the United States would pay $15 million to Mexico, which is a very small amount of money, for the Mexican cession, all those lands in the Southwest, like California, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Colorado, Utah, Nevada as well. All that land for $15 million, the Mexican cession. Number 49, the Missouri Compromise, sometimes people also call it the Compromise of 1820, was a compromise that included 3 components. It added Missouri as a slave state. Missouri wants to be a slave state, which creates a problem because that would mean there would be more slave states than free states and be unbalanced representation in Congress. So they want to preserve the balance between slave and free states. So when they add Missouri as a slave state, they also turn around and add Maine as a free state. And then to top it all off, they take it a step further and they draw an imaginary line at Missouri's southern border along longitude and latitude 36 degrees 30. And they say above that line, in all the territories and all the new states that are created out of those territories above 3630, slavery cannot be allowed. They have to be free states. And the territories below that line, they can create slave states. But that's their solution, trying to answer the questions. They know every time they add new states, they're going to have to answer this question: will it be a slave or a free state? Sectionalism for number 50 is the idea that one section of the country has separate goals and beliefs from another section of the country, the kind of conflict between different sections of the same country. Obviously, the North and the South had some major conflicts during this time. Some of the issues they were fighting over were, number one, the tariffs, slavery, the direction of the economy, nullification. They had different views on all of those issues prior to the Civil War. All right, if you look at number 51, let me scroll there to number 51. Why did the land of the United States gained out of the Mexican-American War bring up the issue of slavery? Well, think about it. When those territories eventually want to become states, like California, when it wants to become a state, you have to answer the question of whether or not that new state will be a free state or a slave state. And every time that comes up, it's going to kind of increase the debate, increase the resentment and tension between the two sides. Number 52, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and William Lloyd Garrison were all three abolitionists who were fighting for the abolishment, or they basically fighting to get rid of slavery. That's what it means to abolish slavery, to get rid of slavery. Number 53, the Louisiana Purchase was made by President Thomas Jefferson. He bought the Louisiana Territory from France, and it was significant because it doubled the size of the United States immediately. And it also expanded Jefferson's vision of a country of farmers, his kind of Democrat-Republican belief. And it also gave the United States the Mississippi River, which allowed Western farmers to use the Mississippi River for trade. You know, all three of those things. It doubled the size of the United States, expanded Jefferson's vision of a country of farmers, and allowed Western farmers to use the Mississippi River for trade. Number 54, the Monroe Doctrine comes in place when James Monroe, the fifth president, tells European countries that they are now no longer allowed to intervene or try to colonize the Western Hemisphere, the Americas, North America, South America, Central America. They have to have a hands-off policy. They can't come in and try to create colonies in any of those territories. The U.S. will intervene and try to stop you. Number 55, John C. Calhoun was a South Carolinian who was also the vice president of the United States under Andrew Jackson. He wanted South Carolina, his state, to nullify the tariff of 1832 because he believed it was too high and it was hurting the southern states. He also said that if the federal government did not allow South Carolina and other southern states to nullify laws they thought were unconstitutional, that those states had the right to then secede from the Union and create their own country. Number 56, two important rulings from the Dred Scott decision. Remember, Dred Scott was a slave whose owner took him into a free state, so Dred Scott filed a lawsuit saying, hey, if you take me to a free state, then I'm no longer a slave. I should have my freedom. The case goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says two things. Number one, they say that African Americans, including Dred Scott, are not citizens. Slaves aren't citizens, which means that they can't sue, so we're not even going to listen to your case. And the second thing they do, they take it a step further, and they also overturn the Missouri Compromise because they say that Congress has no authority to deny slavery in any new territories that become states. So basically what they're saying is that all new states are created out of the territories the United States have to allow slavery and a person's right to property. The Wilmot Proviso was a small part that was added. They tried to add to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo after the Mexican-American War. It never actually occurred. It did not pass. But the Wilmot Proviso was an attempt to not allow slavery in any of the lands that the Americans won from Mexico in the Mexican-American War, the Mexican cession lands. And this is important because it demonstrates that the United States is very divided between North and South on the issue of slavery. Number 58, the Compromise of 1850 had several components. It added California as a free state. It said no slavery. It outlawed the slave trade in Washington, D.C. You could still have slaves, you just couldn't trade them anymore. It also said the other lands in the Mexican cession, like New Mexico and Arizona, those lands would decide whether they're going to have slaves or not by popular sovereignty, which means the people in those states would actually vote on whether they want to be a slave state or a free state. But the most important part of the Compromise of 1850 for the South is it gave them a Fugitive Slave Act that returned runaway slaves to their owners. Number 59, Harriet Beecher Stowe was the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, and the impact of Uncle Tom's Cabin is that increased the sympathy for abolitionists. It increased the number of people who wanted to abolish slavery. Number 60, some of the major sectional differences between the North and the South that made the issues between North and the South even worse during this time leading up to the Civil War. You got Uncle Tom's Cabin, Dred Scott's decision, you got Bleeding Kansas, where the pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces are fighting over the issue of popular sovereignty in Kansas. The Brooks-Sumner affair, where Preston Brooks beats Charles Sumner with a cane on the floor of the Senate. Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860 was the final straw that led to this, that was pushing the South in the Civil War because nobody in the South voted for Abraham Lincoln. Not one state voted for him, so they don't support him and wanted to have their own country. Number 61, Fort Sumter in South Carolina was the first battle of the Civil War. Number 62, William T. Sherman was the general who won the Atlanta campaign. He was the Union general that won the Atlanta campaign, and after he capturing Atlanta, he went on his march to the sea from Atlanta to Savannah, burning everything in his path. And this is the idea of total war, where you want to break the will of the South to fight, not just attack military targets, but also civilian targets. Number 63, Gettysburg and Vicksburg were the turning points in the war, because Gettysburg basically crippled the Southern military, and Vicksburg divided the South in two.